What is going on, guys? Hockey Guy 1 here. Welcome to my review of Dr. No. So Dr. No is directed by Terrence Young and stars Sean Connery, Ursula Andress, Jack Lord, and Joseph Wiseman. The story is about John String, which is basically like this kind of chief of the MI6 who ends up getting killed in Jamaica. So basically James Bond is sent to Jamaica by the MI6 to basically investigate the matters and kind of like goes behind it and basically just kind of like investigate the whole scenario. Story is really good. I really like the way they kind of did this whole espionage story with the whole investigation of like a little murder of like their own MI6 agent, and it really kind of works for this, especially since like they kind of keep it a mystery who Dr. No is for a while, because like they don't really reveal him or even who he is until like James Bond pretty much meets him. And I do really like how they end up doing that. Is basically it kind of keeps the tension pretty high and it keeps like the investigation going on pretty well, and it just really makes more kind of into the investigation and kind of see what's kind of behind it, and basically like how basically the whole investigation goes and how you kind of see how basically like exactly what he's doing, and should see who's kind of behind it and see how he's investigating the scene. The story structure is pretty good. I mean, you get the first act, which pretty much starts with the whole thing where John Stringman kind of gets killed along with his secretary, and they kind of like hear about it and basically send James Bond to investigate the whole situation in Jamaica. And it just is a pretty good way to start off the movie. It makes sense. I mean, immediately showing the assassination, what exactly James Bond is sent to investigate, really kind of works, and it makes sense for the whole situation of this movie, as it does really start out the movie and just kind of like sets up the whole plot. And then we kind of got the second act, which is basically showing like the whole step-by-step plan of James Bond to basically try and just like investigation kind of thing. Like it shows how he's investigating, and I really like, and I really like the way they kind of like show him investigate, and it's kind of like doing it, and it really works for this movie, and I really like each and every way and how they do it, and like keep it so it's kind of interesting each way they kind of do it, and as well as just I really like it's just really interesting. It's anything when eventually like you kind of like get to the climax, she gets captured by Dr. No, and you finally find out where Dr. No is. It's just a really good way how they kind of do that. It's kind of like how they keep Dr. No a secret until like James Bond sees him, and I do really like how they end up doing that, and it basically shows how kind of like behind something there, and as well just how they kind of just do the whole situation and how Dr. No just kind of capturing him in a prison, and eventually once he kind of escapes, he does end up like killing Dr. No, and then you kind of got the whole ending where he's kind of like out with Honey Ryder in the kind of middle of like, this hearing, and it just really works for the ending of this movie, as it does kind of like feel like it's a conclusion, like he's over with the whole investigation. He kind of killed Dr. No, so you can just kind of like last Honey Ryder inside of the boat now, and it definitely does feel like it included this whole movie story. The pacing is really good, as basically it does feel like it's a completed movie, and as well as just how they kind of doing it definitely does really work. I mean, it definitely does feel like this movie is complete, and it definitely feels like the movie is long enough, and it definitely do keep you invested into the movie to kind of make it feel like you're into it. James Bond is a really good character. As this is his first movie, you can definitely see just exactly how smart he is. I mean, the way he kind of does this whole investigation, how determined he is, and especially like when you can see how basically he saw when someone wasn't exactly on his side and was about to betray him. I mean, it just, you can really see how smart he was, and it's kind of a big part of his character, is just how he's kind of like smart with these investigations, and it just really works for this movie, and it just really is a pretty good character, as basically you can just see that he's smart, and especially you can also kind of like see an introduce of how he kind of like Skirtles is basically he kind of like gets into multiple in this movie, and basically it obviously is like a part of his character, and it just kind of like how he's done basically, and as well just of course how he's determined to get through the whole investigation, and eventually once he gets through it, you can definitely see exactly how he's operated, and I do really like how they end up doing his character. Honey Rider is basically like the kind of Bond realness, and basically as her character kind of was, she basically just like the kind of person you can kind of see that like she collects shells, and that there isn't really much to her character, but I mean that's kind of the point of all these Bond girls, because like they don't really stay with James Bond really more than a movie, so I do feel like just it makes sense, and I had to make them one-dimensional. I mean, at least at the time, like as the first one, like it made kind of sense for us, and it definitely did kind of make sense for me, kind of one-dimensional. Basically, it's just kind of just how a manga kind of like fits into the story. I mean, they can't really do much with a manga because obviously there's a whole investigation going on, as well as just how they kind of do James Bond's character. They can't really make they're gonna kind of like have that much character, so it makes sense for the story. Dr. No is a pretty good villain. I mean, he's obviously the first villain in this franchise, and basically what really works about him is that he's kind of like a mystery. I mean, they mention him a couple times in the movie, but like you don't really know who he is, because like they don't exactly show him until James Bond sees him. And I do feel like that really works for this movie's story, and just it makes a villain that's kind of more intimidating because he's more mysterious, and especially his whole plan of explanation that this one, it really makes sense and works for the movie. I mean, you can definitely see exactly what he's trying to do, and just exactly how intimidating he is. I mean, his whole plan kind of thing really works, and just the whole mystery element of his character is what makes him a bit more intimidating, and it's just a pretty good villain for the way to start the franchise. The acting is really good. You got Sean Connery, who obviously plays James Bond in this movie, and he does a fantastic job. I mean, he really feels like the character. He really tries in a role, and he really does feel like the character, and then same thing with Ursula Andress and his Honey Rider. She really feels like the character, and same thing with Joseph Wiseman as Dr. No. He does really feel like the character, and definitely does try and roll as, and then definitely does really feel like a kind of villainous feeling when he's on screen. The action is honestly kind of silly. I mean, it's kind of the point, like, it kind of seems like they were definitely trying to make it a little silly, but, so I do feel like it does work in that case, and I do feel like they did a pretty good job, because of how silly it is, I feel like it did kind of make them do a bit more creative things, so I thought that's a pretty good idea to do for this movie. Cinematography is really good, as they do use each camera angle to its advantage. Like, they do a good job of, like, showing the characters' emotions when they need to, and basically does kind of, like, reflect on it pretty well, and especially when they do a lot of close-ups. Then, like, there's a whole kind of wild, they do a lot that do capture the landscape of the scene, and I do think they do a really good job kind of, like, using the cinematography to its advantage, kind of, like, showing the landscape of the scene as well. And I feel like they do a really good job with cinematography in this movie. Lighting is really good, as basically when it's at night you can see what's going on, and they do a pretty good job with that to make sure you can see what's going on when it's at night. The editing is mostly great, as they do usually do a good job, and like transitioning from one scene to another. I mean, there are a few things that I probably could nitpick with the editing, but like there's really only one scene, but like every other scene was fine with the editing. I mean, they do usually do a pretty good job kind of like moving it from one scene to another, especially from one camera angle to another. They do a really good job with that mostly, and I do think they do a great job overall with it. The score is really good. They start off with the main theme of this movie, which ended up being like the main theme of the franchise, and I do feel like just that gets you really into the movie. I mean, it starts off right that way, and it's just a really exciting song. You know, it really gets you right into the movie. Definitely since they do it during like a gun barrel thing that also ends up being in every other James Bond movie after this, and it's just like, kind of like a start of a tradition, and it just really gets you into this movie. And it just really, well, there's also the Three Blind Mice song, which is kind of silly, but that was like kind of the point. I mean, it worked because it was kind of there for like a silly moment. It was like they have these assassins kind of act like three blind mice, and it's just kind of silly, and it really works for that moment. Set designs are really good. I really like the looks of Jamaica in this movie, and I do really like just the looks of everything in this movie, and I like the looks of Dr. No's flare kind of thing, and it does kind of give the kind of illness feeling. I do really like the looks of it, and same thing with the whole kind of like everywhere that James Bond goes, basically. I mean, I really like each and every set. It just really kind of works for the movie, and it just looks really good. Overall, Dr. No is a fantastic start to the James Bond franchise, and it's definitely a fantastic movie. So I'm going to give Dr. No a 10 out of 10. That was my review of Dr. No. What are your thoughts on Dr. No? Tell me in the comments below. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.